He wondered what was taking his aunt so long to come yelling for him to come out of his room. He knew Matt had to have seen the message in the mirror by now. He put his ear to the door and listened hard to see if he heard them talking about him. All he heard was the sounds of morning preparation. He eased the door open a crack so he could hear what was going on in the bathroom. When he heard the shower running and Matt whistling, he knew instantly what had happened. Matt was not going to tell. He was going to ignore him just like he always did. He was not going to tell, and Aunt Niecy was never going to find out about the bad words on the foggy bathroom mirror. Jay shut the door and went to sit on his bed. This was not over. There had to be something he could do to get to Matt. 10 minutes later, when Matt walked out into the room from taking his shower, he wanted to smash him in his face because of the smirk he wore. It said, "You lose again, you little punk. You thought I was going to run and tell Auntie on you, right? But you are so not worth the effort." They both continued to silently get dressed, each very much aware of the other's anger and resentment. But when Matt burst out laughing for no apparent reason, Jay knew he was laughing at him and vowed he would do everything before the day was out, and vowed he would do something before the day was out to get the attention of everyone in this whole family. As he turned to walk out of the room, he turned back to look at his older cousin and, with hate dripping from his words, said, "You'll be sorry. Just watch and see." Mimi and Chrissy. Mimi woke with a start. Her heart was thundering in her chest, and she was breathing fast. Something had frightened her. Something had frightened her in her sleep. She lay very still and listened to see if there was something in her room. There was no sound and no movement, so after a moment, she got out of bed and walked to the window. It was still dark outside, and the house was very quiet. She looked at the clock by her bed and was surprised to see that it was 4 a.m. She looked over at her sister and was glad to see that she was still sound asleep. She watched the sky gradually brighten as the sun slowly started its daily voyage across the space. She loved to hear the birds sing and was sorry when the sounds of their sweet chirps were drowned out by the loud roar of traffic and people. Her mind went back to the dream that awakened her, and she shuddered as the feeling of fear enveloped her young body. It was unusual for her to dream, and this particular dream was so horrible, so real, that she was afraid to go back to sleep for fear it would come back again. When she first woke, she thought she had screamed and looked over at her sister, afraid she had wakened her. But her sister was still sound asleep, so Mimi figured she must have screamed in her mind. She was glad she did not waken her sister. She would have been so frightened, and she had been through enough. It was Chrissy that usually had nightmares, which caused Mimi to get out of her own bed and crawl into bed with her to soothe and comfort her as she tossed and moaned. With the image of her nightmare still fresh in her mind, she decided to stay awake and wait for the morning to erase the night in the hope that it would erase the fear of her nightmare. When she heard her sister begin to moan and whimper, she turned away from the window and walked slowly to her bed, easing herself down and gently wrapping her arms around her tiny frame. Ever since their mother had died, Chrissy started every day the same way, tossing, turning, and moaning. The feel of her big sister wrapping her arms around her, and the soft, reassuring whispers in her ear that she was there and that everything was going to be all right, relaxed little Christine, and she soon fell back to sleep. Mimi wished she could cry and have someone come to her and wrap their arms around her and tell her everything was going to be all right. But she wasn't a baby, and she knew better. She knew that nothing was going to be all right ever again, no matter how much it seemed like it. She looked at her sister and felt fresh pain stabbing her heart because she favored their mother so much. It was like seeing a miniature version of her. Mimi wished she had magic powers so she could make time go back to that day, the last day she had seen her mother alive. She would never have gone to school. If she had told her mother she had a stomachache, she might have let her stay home. Then she would have stayed home and not gotten in that car, and then she would be alive today. Their lives had been one long nightmare since then, an even bigger nightmare than before the accident. First, knowing that your own father didn't want you was bad enough. But then to find out that none of your relatives wanted you either was worse than anything she could have imagined. She didn't know what they had done, that nobody wanted them. Heck, she didn't even know any of their relatives, so why didn't they like them? It was worse for Chrissy because she was the baby and was used to Mama hugging and kissing her. That's why Mimi tried to hug her and kiss her a lot, so she wouldn't miss Mama so much. But there wasn't anything, but there wasn't anyone to hug and kiss Mimi. She refused to act like a baby and cry about it, or let anyone even know that she cared. She just had to face the fact that she was never going to be loved by anyone like her mama loved her, and that was that. The first cousin that they went to live with was so nice to Chrissy that Mimi was almost hopeful that their life had a chance to get better. But when she heard the man saying he didn't want all of them, she knew the nightmare wasn't over. Unlike Jay, she didn't show her feelings, she just kept it bottled up inside. She tried her best to be nice and happy, hoping that would make people like her and let them stay. She was angry that Jay kept being so difficult. If he kept misbehaving, then the one person that would decide to keep them would end up kicking them out, and then they'd be put in foster care and split up. Mimi was determined not to let that happen. She would grab Chrissy and run away if she had to. She would never let anyone take her sister away from her. Chrissy was the only person in the world that loved her. There was not a day that Chrissy wouldn't tell her that she loved her. Mimi lived for those tender moments she shared with her sister. She knew her sister had no way of knowing, but hearing her sister say she loved her was the glue that kept Mimi from falling apart. Of course, Aunt Niecy said it too, but Mimi was sure she was saying it just to be nice. Besides, she had daughters of her own to love. Why should she want to love someone else's daughters? Deep down inside, Mimi wished it were true though. She wished her Aunt Niecy really could love them. Shoot, she wished anyone really could love them. She didn't even think Jesus loved them, even though the lady in the church says he does all the time. How could Jesus love them when he let such horrible things happen to their family? No matter, Mimi felt like the only person she could depend on was herself. So she decided to be as good as she could, and hopefully Aunt Niecy wouldn't pay such attention to Jay and not kick them out. She liked the nice room she had fixed up for them, and she liked the new school they were in, and she liked the new clothes she had bought for them. But if there was one thing Mimi had learned, it was that nothing good lasts forever. She looked at her sister sleeping peacefully and snuggled closer to her. She was right on the edge of the bed, and her back would be killing her in a few minutes, but she was used to it. Her sister needed her to stay close, and that is what she intended to do, no matter what the cost.